Good morning, friends. So I have officially started into my first book of Galactic-thon. It is more than midway into the month. I've really only been working on bonus books so far, but I'm finally starting into one of the actual prompts, which is going to be my sci-fi focused books for this video. And so that is Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian or Gillian mcallister. I'm not sure which one it is. So this is a thriller, but it does have a sci-fi twist on it where the main character at the start of the book is a witness to her son perpetrating a pretty serious crime. And that night when she falls asleep, she wakes up the next day and it's the day prior. So the book starts on October 30th and then she wakes up on October 29th, and it moves backwards as she's trying to figure out, like, how did her son reach this point of committing this crime? What is going on in his life that she is unaware of? Because it seems like he's got a pretty good life. It seems like he's like an A+ honor roll student. He's like a little bit of a nerd. He's got a girlfriend. But the more she's investigating this, the more she's learning, like, he has been hiding all of this stuff, and because she's been wrapped up in her own problems and her own insecurities and things, she hasn't been able to realize this. I'm already about 4 hours in, and I will say I really like the little bits of character work that are being done there where the main character is realized. I was so focused on how people perceived me in this way that I didn't consider how my son was perceiving this situation. I also gotta say I really love her husband. Like, any interactions we see between them, I love that they just feel like a very comfortable couple who've been together for like 20 years and are still very much in love. It doesn't feel like there's any animosity there or any drama around their relationship. But I say that right where I just stopped, there was a reveal that could possibly showcase her husband may know more about what's going on than she does. I don't think that's necessarily what's going to happen, because the author has kind of been doing this thing where the main character will notice something when she relives the experience that she hadn't picked up on before, or realize something is more important than she had previously thought. And so I'm thinking it's just going to be something like that, where her husband's like, oh, it's no big deal, it's just this thing, and she's going to realize, like, that actually matches up with this context and that explains this, and like that's how this is all happening, or something to that effect. But I am liking it, and I also think it's really cool that it's doing this back. I thought it was more Groundhog's Day, where it was the same day on repeat, but it's more this like backwards timeline, which is really interesting because there's certain situations where if it was like, you know, if she had just started at, say, like 30 days prior and was moving forward, there were certain things she could have done to try and help herself or ask for help from other people, but because of this situation, she can't do that. And so I do think the author is utilizing that in a really fun way, where, for example, like, she tries to find a guy who's an expert in like physics to figure out this whole time loop thing, but every time she talks to him, she has to re-explain the whole situation and give all of these little things that will happen in the future to prove to him that she actually is experiencing this, because, I mean, it's wild. Like, why would you think that? She is also a divorce lawyer, so I do appreciate the fact that as a lawyer, like, there's certain elements of her personality that makes sense for her to be the one investigating this crime, even though obviously most of the time she's dealing with divorces, not like a capital case. But I am liking that as well. So overall, it's going really good. It doesn't feel like the most sci-fi book, honestly. It does feel like a thriller book, but again, the layout of the story is very interesting. I do think mcallister is doing a really good job with that, and I think she kind of has a similar thing, and not necessarily sci-fi, but like a different sort of twist on all of her thrillers that she does, and so this is making me more intrigued to try those out. This one was always the one that sounded the most interesting to me, but I've heard positive things about this author's work across the board, so perhaps I may be checking out more of her stuff in the future. We'll see. Hey y'all, so I officially have finished out Wrong Place, Wrong Time, and I really liked this. I mean, I think you could tell from my first update, I was having a really good time with this, but by the end of the book, I am just so enamored with the fact that mcallister literally plotted this entire story out in reverse. Like, that is wild. That is so crazy and so clever how she unfolded everything, how she slowly leads you there along with the main character. I've consumed a lot of mystery content, honestly. I tend to guess some element of pretty much anything I watch or read nowadays. It's pretty surprising if I don't. And with this one, I guessed like one small element. Everything else did in fact catch me off guard, which I think is pretty impressive. But I also just got so emotionally invested in the main character, in her family unit on the whole. Like, I wanted her to figure out what was going on so that she could return to her actual timeline so her family could be happy. I really enjoyed the way we were able to see how she picks up on different things when reliving each of these days, how she starts to notice certain things about her relationships with the people around her so much more when she's not focused on things like, you know, work and having to make money to survive and like chores around the house. It was kind of funny how she mentions some of this stuff just started to not matter to her anymore because whether or not she goes to work, whether or not she does the dishes, like it's not going to impact her. And that was so interesting. So it was really like this conversation of, you know, how much stuff you miss out on just because you get stuck in like the everyday minutia of living life and how easy it is to miss out on things. Like I'm really impressed with how McAllister wrote this entire book. By the end of it, I was so nervous to get the final answer. I was scared for what that answer was going to mean for our main character. But I think McAllister pulled it out so well. And then the epilogue chapter was actually really interesting. And it's silly to say, but I kind of would love a sequel continuing with that and just doing the same thing that this one did. That's all I'm going to say without getting into any more spoilers. But yeah, this was really good. Really good. This is definitely an original thriller. I finished it and I couldn't not give it 5 stars because I can't think of a single issue I really had with the book itself. I was glued in. I read majority of this in a single sitting for a challenge video, but even if I wasn't doing the challenge video, I still think I would have been so engaged that I would have read this in a single sitting. Like, I wouldn't have been surprised if I did. This one also ended up fulfilling a microtrope because the main character and her husband had a good deal of banter. So battle banter was a microtrope to get me some extra points, but this also completed the first prompt of a book that had a time loop or a time travel element. So for the next one, which basically boils down to reading a book that features good versus evil, why would I not go with the Star Wars novel? It's just such a perfect option. So naturally, I'm going to be going with Tears of the Nameless by George Mann. This is the second to last in the young adult High Republic series, and I'm really intrigued to see how things go with this one because we're returning to a character who we've previously seen as a Padawan, but now he's actually a Jedi Knight, and I'm so happy for him because I really like him, Wreath. And once again, he is going up against these nameless, which are basically like sentient lands that are trying to take over the universe because, of course, they are. Hey y'all, so I've officially started into my next Galactic-thon book, which was Tears of the Nameless by George Mann, and so far I am liking this. I really appreciate getting to see more of Wreath. He's a character we met prior in the universe as a Padawan, and we've really seen him go through a lot of traumatic stuff so far, just because of the time he is currently living, where the Jedi are going up against these nihil that are like a mix between space pirates and like also sort of cultists. And when we originally meet him, he is a younger Padawan. Now he is actually a fairly young Jedi Knight, but he's gone through so much, and also the Jedi are just like so desperate for knights at this point that they're amping up everybody's training and promoting everybody a little bit quicker. With Wreath, though, something I've always really enjoyed about his character is the fact that like he doesn't seem like the stereotypical adventurer or really the true knight sort of character. He's a nerd. He's a giant nerd. He loves research, he loves working in his library, and he loves utilizing the knowledge that the Jedi have gathered by traveling the universe. Now we're really getting to see him sort of in his element because he is utilizing all of this stuff to try and solve the issue of the blight, which is like this infection that is growing across the universe and it eats everything in its path. But at the same time, there are also these nameless, which are a slightly sentient beast that Marchion Ro, the head of the Nihil, is utilizing to fight the Jedi because the nameless feed on the Force. And I'm really liking learning about them, and with that we're actually seeing more about ancient civilizations of the Star Wars universe. It's one of those where I think it's so freaking wild the amount of lore that goes into the Star Wars universe. I love it. It's crazy. Wreath's character especially, I do also just love getting to see how much he has grown over these novels that I've read, and we're seeing some interesting parallels between what Wreath is going through here because in his research he is also utilizing a Sith. It's interesting because though Wreath still has faith in the Force, still has faith in the Jedi, like you can see how he is starting to figure out things that like are limits the Jedi have to pay attention to that the Sith don't. And as I was saying, we're seeing some great parallels between what Reath is experiencing here with Comac, who was actually one of Reath's masters. And he has some perspectives in the story as well, where we're seeing him continuing to also investigate the Nihil, trying to figure out how to fight against them. But he has sort of lost his faith in the Jedi and in the Force. We have flashback sections where he also was kind of experiencing something similar as a Padawan, and now is kind of having to relearn those lessons as an adult. And again, I think like the parallels that are going on between those three perspectives are so good. Some other characters we're seeing from in this book that I don't necessarily think are really needed, honestly. As of right now, I would actually say they kind of feel like they're there to fill page time. One of them is a Padawan that is helping Reath, but I wouldn't say he's like an antithesis to Reath, but he is more of an adventurer and he has like a different perspective than Reath does, which is useful to him, but overall, not super necessary. Then we also have that of Vernestra Rwoh, another relatively young Jedi Knight who is more in the battlefield fighting against the Nihil, and I think having her perspective is sort of seeing what's going on the battlefields a little bit more. Thus far, neither of these perspectives have really showcased to me why they're really needed in the novel, and so I'm not loving that. But at the same time, I'm only like halfway in. There's always the opportunity that the second half of this book is going to showcase to me, here's why their perspective matters, Nat. But I am enjoying this. I'm really glad I finally get to return to these characters because I hit the point where I was all caught up on the High Republic novels for a while, so that's why I continued forward in the timeline with my Canon Project episodes. But now there's enough novels in the High Republic for me to backtrack, and I'm really glad to just be returning to some of these characters. Like I said, namely Reath. I love Vernestra as well, but Reath is really the one that's shining in this novel so far.
Hello friends, so I have not officially finished out Tears of the Nameless just yet, but I was filming some updates, so I figured why not go ahead and film one now for this, because I am nearly finished. And I will say, it did become more apparent as to why we had perspectives like, oh my god, why did I just blank on her name? Vernestra, there we go. For Vernestra or the other Padawan character. Though I will say with the other Padawan character, I feel like, I don't even know if I want to say it's a twist, but this character was utilized so that a current event could happen in this book that we've basically seen this same event happen 3 or 4 times now. And it just doesn't feel like it has the same emotional impact because we've seen it numerous times now. So that's a shame, and does kind of once again make me feel like we probably could have gone without this kid's perspective. Even though he helped Reath out, I don't really think he was that necessary. We do also get to see a bit more from Affie, who I forgot to mention. She is a smuggler who ends up kind of becoming friends with a few different Jedi and Padawans throughout the series. And so we saw a little bit more of her as well. Another character where I don't necessarily think she was super needed for the story, but she's more in the thick of things and does allow for a view of the events that are going on in the universe that isn't from a Jedi character. So I could appreciate that. Seeing how this battle with the Nihil is impacting, other parts of the universe so far. So I am really liking this, and we're really gearing up now for the climax for, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a final battle. No, it might be, because we also have a Jedi hunter, essentially, that is being sent by Marchion Ro. And I can't quite put a name on, what is he? I don't know if he's supposed to be totally mentally there hunter, or if perhaps he just is a real psychopath. There's also nods here or there that he might not be completely, I don't say human because that sounds specious, but even if he was another sentient alien, he almost comes across beast-like at times. It's wonky. So I am really interested to see this guy through somebody else's perspective to understand what is he? And I'm assuming there will probably be some big battle with him as well. So that'll be fun. I also think I've officially figured out what I'm going to be reading for the next prompt, because this was one that I kept going back and forth on, given the fact that it was a book featuring political intrigue. There's a lot out there. Or a storyline where fate/destiny is utilized. That's one where I feel like you could use some Star Wars novels, but I don't know. I quite want to take the chance that that'll happen, because it may not. So I think instead I am going to stick with the political intrigue, and I'm officially going to finish out the Illuminae Files series by Kristoff and Amie Kauffman with the final one, Obsidio. This series has been pretty fun overall, even though I did feel like the second book was just a rinse repeat of the first, and I've been a little nervous that the third will kind of do the same thing. I am still invested in the universe enough and some of the characters we've met to see like how are things going to officially close out. And we have this big bad corporate entity, so of course they're involved in like everything that's happening in this universe, and naturally that's where some of the politics are going to be playing in. Plus there's just a lot of like classic sci-fi tropes and characters in this universe that I think fits so well for Galactic-thon, so may as well ride the wave with that. We'll see. Hello, my friends. So I have officially finished out my next book for Galactic-thon. And I'm sorry, I actually did mean to give y'all a little bit more of an update while I was reading this book, but I got so sucked in that just didn't happen. So for the third prompt, which was to read a book that had political intrigue, I ended up reading Obsidio by Amie, Kauffman, and Kristoff. This is the third in the Illuminate Files series. Okay, I really liked the first book in this series. I felt like the second was good, but was a rinse repeat of the first, and it just felt very separated from the first book as well. This one really takes those two books and combines them together because our cast in this really built out, and there's a lot of returning characters from the two prior books, which I very much enjoyed. But we also have another second chance romance between two teenagers who again are finding themselves in the middle of some sort of a battle, and slowly a relationship develops between them again as they are dealing with all of this stuff. I honestly don't think that third romance was really necessary. And especially because the storytelling of it is so separate from a lot of the other aspects of the book, it really messed with pacing. So I'd be really engaged with what's taking place on this spaceship, and then I'd get pulled out to follow these characters who are on this planet and having to deal with this occupation and just blah, 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 blah. I'm going to do my best to not get into spoilers with it. But though there were some very emotional moments because of the setup of that story, and I could understand why the events of this occupation on this planet played into the rest of the plot line throughout the series, I don't think so much of the book really needed to be dedicated to actually seeing all of this play out through some of these characters. Along with that, I also had an issue with these authors once again doing a certain twist and reveal that they've literally done in the last two books. So when it happened for a third time, I didn't fall for it. Like, I knew what was coming. It didn't have the emotional impact because I've already seen this numerous times. I don't trust the authors anymore. That said though, the storytelling of this series is phenomenal. I mean, it's done in this multimedia format that is so much fun that you can tell really required the authors to get creative in how they told certain aspects, how they were able to present certain perspectives, and that's really interesting. That did keep me engaged, and I did actually really enjoy seeing the relationships that were developing between the main characters from the first and second book. That was a lot of fun. And I did actually enjoy how logic-based this book could be at times, because these people have gone through so freaking much that like their teams are so depleted, their resources are very limited. So there was a lot of stuff that was brought up that could very easily have gone by the wayside and was conveniently left out, but like the authors actually took time to acknowledge that stuff and discuss it and see how it was impacting these characters and what they were planning out. There's also one character in this that returned as well that has this very back and forth, are they good, are they evil thing that I've really enjoyed throughout the series, but they help to reinforce the overall theme of the series, which is like everybody deserves a second chance. Having that main theme applied to this character after some of the things we have watched them do, yeah, that's odd. That was weird. I will admit, that was really weird to me. Overall though, this was a fun time. I did blast through this audiobook. Like, I just put it on and kept playing games on my phone because I just wanted to keep listening to it. The production on all of this series via audio is phenomenal. I highly recommend listening to them on audio, but you should also flip through the physical so you can appreciate the artistry that is done with having these multimedia formats. Overall, I think this book series is very, very well produced. I don't necessarily think it's like the best YA sci-fi out there, but I was actually talking to Josh about it, and it does very much make me think of like binging through a bunch of action adventure movies like James Bond or like Mission Impossibles, Jason Bourne's, where in the grand scheme of things, it seems like the plots are just kind of reutilized in a different format. but you have such a fun time watching and experiencing the storyline that you don't really care. That's kind of how I felt about this series overall by the end of it. So with this final one, I did go ahead and give it 4 stars. I like how everything rounded out. I like that actions very much had consequences in this. I think the final ending for the political mystery that's been underlying the events of all these books had a very satisfying resolution. So yeah, this was a fun time. I'm glad I finally got to it. And plus, this was a book that was on my 10 books for 2025 list. So feeling very accomplished by knocking it off. Having finished that book out now, the next prompt for Galactic-thon on my team is to read a book that has a heist. And this has me so excited because I really appreciate a good heist story. And with the sci-fi twist, that sounds really interesting, but I didn't know what to pick up. So I turned to Google, trusty friend, and searched up sci-fi heist stories. One that I stumbled across, which is actually already on my TBR, is the Stardust Grail by Yume Kitasei. I think I first stumbled upon this one when Elizabeth from Plant-Based Bride read all of the sci-fi finalists for Goodreads last year, and I'm pretty sure she had really positive things to say about this. I don't really remember anything about it apart from the fact that it is a heist story, and I think it may also be queer, so I'm very interested going into it. Here's hoping that I will actually talk to y'all and give you some thoughts about halfway through the book rather than at the end, but I'm hoping to start that one later today, and I'm very excited.
Good morning, friends. So I have started into my next book, the Stardust Grail, and I'm actually really liking this so far. It starts off pretty strong. I will say in the very, very beginning parts, I wasn't sure if this was actually going to be necessarily a heist. It felt more reminiscent of like Indiana Jones, where there's like a competition to try and get whatever this mythical artifact is, but now we are setting up for an actual heist, and I'm very into it. Even though her name is now escaping me, I do really like our main character. I think the author's done a really great job with world building so far because it is very extensive in a way that makes sense for sci-fi, but also is a little overwhelming at times. But even still, I think it's really impressive the amount of depth she has gone into. Travel between planets is pretty normalized at this point. We've met numerous other species, but unsurprisingly, Earth can be pretty xenophobic still. That there's like a reminiscent of the Federation military, which does its best to try and fight for human specific situations. They talk about it in a way where it's as though they're trying to ensure human survival, but at the same time like are going about it by colonizing other planets essentially, and almost, you know, doing what like say the British Museum does, which is going and taking their artifacts and their technology and utilizing it for their own benefit, but not in a way that is fair to the other planet or to the other species. The other character I really love is Uncle, which is our main character's partner essentially, and Briren, I think, is the name of his species, and they are these centuries old giant gelatinous water-based beings, but they are so brilliant and live for so long that they actually are starting to lose a lot of their knowledge and history because they just don't really record anything. They are actually losing the ability to reproduce. They need this stardust grail artifact thing in order to do so. And Uncle has always wanted to be a parent. And so Maya, that's her name. So when Maya finds out there's possibility of finding the Stardust Grail, even though it's sold to her in a way that utilizing this will help humans to continue their connection to outer space, to the outer universe, she is more like, I don't care about that. I care about giving Uncle what he wants, and this species the ability to continue reproducing. So she's unfortunately stuck making this decision. She is making it for Uncle also. She hasn't really acknowledged this to anybody else within the team. And then we also have a former military person, Will, who has had some serious augmentations done due to surviving a very terrible battle, we hear, with this other species that's reminiscent of humans. And it was kind of funny actually because Uncle sort of calls them out for being like, yes, they're very similar to humans, like your bodies are similar, your sense receptors are all similar, also you guys love war. So that was very funny. But so that is Will, and she ended up going against the military and is kind of considered a mutineer at this point, but at the same time, like, also still kind of believes in what the military believes. So like, she and Maya butt heads a lot, and I'm imagining there's going to be a bit of a queer romance between those two. Then our final person is a robot who was actually a medical robot, and somebody ended up messing with his programming to allow him to assist in their passing, I'll put it that way. And because he is a medical droid, that's a big no-no. Now though, he basically just wants to continue surviving and is doing what he can to almost become more human, like more sentient. And so with him, it does seem like we're going to be having that natural discussion that comes up with these sorts of AI characters of what makes somebody human, what makes them not. And I do always love that conversation, so I'm here for that. He's also like a great cook, which was kind of like something that was so fun given the fact that, you know, he doesn't imbibe food. That was interesting. So I'm really liking this so far. It's setting up really fun, and now we're like officially getting into the plan for the heist, as I said, and I am rip-roaring ready to go. I'm definitely going to be continuing this audiobook at work today because I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's going to happen next. I'm having a fun time. I'm really liking this. It's really good.
Good morning, friends. So I officially finished out Stardust Grail yesterday, and I did go ahead and swing by the library so I could pick up a physical copy because there was an element of the audiobook at the end that I was a little thrown off by, but there's actually this little, I don't want to call it an excerpt, almost like an index for the different kind of species that are discussed throughout the series, throughout the book. I haven't had coffee yet. I'm like actively making coffee, so excuse me if I fudge a few things. But the sentient species that we see throughout the book, which are in the process of like actively traveling throughout space, and just gives like a little rundown of each of them. And so I was intrigued on what that looked like, but also I just wanted to have a copy of this so I could hold it in my stack for the end of the month. I really liked this overall. I think, like I said, the start of this book felt very almost like Indiana Jones, and then we set up for the actual heist where I was like, okay, this is where we get Ocean's 11-y, and then we rounded our way back to Indiana Jones a little bit, and then we had like some Star Wars thrown in there. Actually, probably more like Star Trek because of how they handle galactic-wide issue that is now threatening them. And now my water is boiling, so I'm gonna go pour my coffee. But so I did really like this, but it was kind of a roller coaster ride reading it because it never felt like it stayed one thing, which is actually pretty impressive. I didn't ever feel like the story was choppy because of that. Like, it always felt like things flowed together pretty well. There were some events that happened that I was like, okay, this feels like a last minute reveal to make this happen, but sure. But then there were also other parts where it's like, oh, this makes sense for all of the clues you've laid out to us so far. I get it. I get it. So I did really like this. I wouldn't really say there's a queer romance in reality. You can feel like a little bit of tension between Maya and Will, which I did enjoy. I still very much enjoyed Will's character. I'm not going to remember his name now. Medix. I also enjoyed Medix, the android. Of course I did, because I always love a good android. And I really liked the interesting relationship Medix and Will had. It wasn't romantic. It was very platonic, almost like somebody who's a native of a country taking their friend who is not and showing them around. It felt like Will was trying to showcase to Medix different ways to become more human and act more human. And I really liked that. I thought that was very interesting. In the scheme of this book, that seems specious, not so much human necessarily, but like not a robot. I really liked how Medix was used throughout the story. I can't really go into any more specifics than that, but I really liked that. Wow, I just noticed this blurb on the front from Veronica Roth, an Indiana-style outer space heist adventure. Yeah, that really is a perfect encapsulation of this book. I had a lot of fun with this. I really liked Maya as a character. I grew to care about her a lot. I loved how she was writing this line between wanting to go out and adventure and explore all these new things and be a space pirate, but then at the same time, like, she wants to be settled somewhere. She wants to have a home. She wants to be able to really make something she loves and is passionate about into an actual respected career. I loved seeing the balance between those two things throughout the story. I haven't done an official compile breakdown yet on this one. I'm gonna guesstimate this will probably be around 4 stars. It sounds silly, but I do think if this had taken the jump into having a romance between Will and Maya, it might have gotten up to a 5-star. There was just something missing for me to absolutely love it, though I did very much enjoy it. The queer elements, I think, more come into the fact that there are multiple characters we meet throughout the universe that use neopronouns because it makes sense, you know, they're aliens, they therefore wouldn't have terminology like he, she, or they. That made sense, but like in a real world context, it's essentially neopronouns. And I think this could be a really great way to introduce that topic to someone, especially if they've never encountered neopronouns before. This might be a starting off point for a conversation. This officially finished out the heist pick. For the last prompt of my team is to read a 5-star prediction. And guys, this worked out so freaking perfectly because I can pick my next Star Wars book. So doing 2 birds, 1 stone, actually like 3 birds, because this also will count for a prompt on my Reddit fantasy bingo board. I can't believe when I filmed that TBR, I commented that the pirates one, where they're not seafaring pirates, was so like, I wanted to know where you could go with that if they're not seafaring. I'm such a dum-dum because literally almost the entirety of the High Republic in Star Wars is about the Jedi going against these space pirates called the Nihil. I literally had that light bulb moment while editing that video. I don't know why that didn't occur to me while I was filming it. For a 5-star prediction, I picked up Tempest Breaker by Cavan. This is going to be a continuation off of Tempest Runner, which was an audio drama following Lorna D. She is one of the, not the head of the Nihil, but she is like one of the top lieutenants in the Nihil. And in the first book, we get a exploration of her background, and then we see as she is on the run from the Jedi because they actually mistake her to be the head of the Nihil, the Eye. I love Lorna. Like, she is definitely a bad girl. She is one of those characters where like it doesn't matter if she's good or bad. She is for her. She is ensuring her own survival at any cost. And I really appreciate that about her. She is the definition of gatekeep, gaslight, girl boss. Like, she will do what is necessary to ensure she comes out on top. And I just really grew to like her. I had so much fun following her in that first one. And this one, we are seeing kind of the afterwards where she has officially cleared her name with the Jedi, but she is still sort of on the run. Except the story is actually told in a way where Lorna is doing an interview with a reporter to kind of tell her side of the story after the fact. And that's been really interesting. This one's also an audio drama. So though the physical book is like nearly 600 pages, the audiobook is only 6 hours, and it is a full cast, which is awesome. And in this one, Lorna gets sort of not quite forced, but highly encouraged to work with the Jedi to try and bring down Marchion Ro, the actual Eye of the Nihil. I've been really enjoying this. I've been blasting through it. I started it last night while I was cooking dinner and just did not want to stop listening. It is so good. I really love Lorna's character. I think we see a little bit of growth from her. Like, she has maybe not matured, but like she's become a bit more empathic. Not quite as prickly, but certainly still is not the nicest person. Kind of fun seeing her interact with some of these characters because she's worked with some of them for some time now, so they're kind of just used to her and don't pay much attention. But one of the Jedi she is working with is Avar Kriss. I don't love Avar. I think she's a pretty forgettable character overall. She just seems like quintessential golden child. There's like one element that kind of taints her character, which is the fact that she has a romance with another Jedi, and obviously like that's frowned upon in the Jedi Order. Yeah, I don't love her, and it's been very interesting seeing her through Lorna's eyes in this story because obviously these two are enemies, and Avar has tried to take Lorna out multiple times. There's a lot of tension there, and it's really fun, and it's led to some really amusing banter because they don't really have a choice. They have to work together and rely on each other. And I'm really liking it. I'm really liking this. This is going so good. In fact, I'm like 70% done. So probably will be finishing that here soon. Hello, my friends. So I officially finished out Tempest Breaker, and I really like this. In fact, I would go so far as to say this was nearly a 5-star. Technically, my compile broke down to about a 4.5. I guess there were a few things I may have liked more if they're altered a little bit, but overall still had a really phenomenal time with this. Really enjoyed it. Part of me loves this as like a goodbye to Lorna, but also I would love to see her story continued at the same time, and I can't decide which camp I would prefer them to do. I once again loved seeing some of the Jedi characters through Lorna's perspective, seeing Elzar Mann through her was kind of interesting, because Elzar is definitely the Jedi who has like struggled with his belief in the Force and with his ability to like follow what the Order tells him more than any other Jedi we've seen in this time period. And so it was really funny seeing somebody like him through Lorna's perspective, where she's like even more chaotic, very much more neutral. Well, he is still, I'd say, like more chaotic good. So while a lot of the time it seems like he's really pushing the envelope, in this one he seemed like such a square through Lorna's perspective, and that was a lot of fun, honestly. There were some twists and turns with the plot that I really enjoyed, namely any interaction we had between Lorna and Marchion Ro was amazing. I was just glued into it, and there's just so much tension between them that like makes you uncomfortable just reading it. You want me to move my heating pad? I will say this book was broken up into parts, which I understand because it was kind of a way to showcase to us like a major transition in the story without actually having to, you know, give us the transition time. It did feel like there were one too many. So I officially finished that out, and that is the last of the official prompts for the Explorers team. But there's an additional way we can get points for our teams if we manage to finish all of the 5 main prompts, which is that you get the ability to pick a prompt from a different team and fulfill one of theirs. For this one, I'm kind of mood reading a little bit with it, and I decided to pick up 𝗖cie 7 by, I'm not gonna remember the author, but it's up here. It's up here for you to see. So obviously this recently got turned into a movie, which has of course bumped it up a lot of people's TBR lists, and I am just like all of them because I hadn't originally heard about this book until I heard about the movie and was intrigued about it. I am amused by the fact that the movie went with 𝗖cie 17 instead of 𝗖cie 7, and I looked up like a Reddit review which was saying something along the lines of what's the difference, and somebody just said +10. I appreciate that smartassery. But so this is following Mickey Barnes, who is, a lot of people believe, conscripted, but in actuality he volunteered to go on this mission where he is kind of utilized as like a crash test dummy, because if he perishes in some way, they have the ability to create a carbon copy of him that has all of the memories of the prior ones, so long as he continues to upload his memory banks. But 𝗖cie 7 ends up falling into a hole on one of his patrols and gets taken away by this thing of the planet, kind of saved by it, so he ends up surviving. However, his teammates believed him to be gone, and so have already put in for a 𝗖cie 8. Duplicates are dangerous. The people who run this whole operation don't want any of those. So if one of them gets found out, they both get destroyed. And 𝗖cie 7 is kind of just like doing his best, trying to figure out how to make this work along with 𝗖cie 8. And it's sort of silly. We're very much focused on the world building so far and kind of establishing how they started doing these, once again, all I can think of is exploration studies. Let's go with that. And also how 𝗖cie ended up in this role, because it was a role that nobody really wanted. Yes, he is kind of immortal, but at the same time, like, he has to experience death in all of these different ways in order for this to go through. And they kind of talk about how it's possible for them to take care of it themselves to stop their suffering, but it's pretty uncommon because, you know, we as humans just have this instinctual desire to survive and like evolutionary push to keep us from doing those things in order to, you know, cut our strings short. I'll put it that way. So it's been interesting so far, but there are like little things here and there that we're seeing which aren't quite adding up, and is having me intrigued to see like what's the larger plot going to be. I'm enjoying it so far. It has me very excited to see the movie and watch Robert Pattinson acting alongside himself. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure when I looked, this would fulfill a prompt for the AI team. I want to say it was like prompt 3. If I manage to finish it, I'll be getting some bonus points for my team, and that is always great. Good morning, friends. So I think last time I talked to y'all, I mentioned starting into 𝗖cie 7. And so now I have finished that. I liked it overall. It very much felt like following a character dealing with an unusual set of circumstances in this sci-fi world. But apart from that, it seemed very slice of life. I mean, granted, like the slice of life is pretty unusual because of where they're staying, because of the circumstances 𝗖cie is living in as this expendable person. Honestly, it felt like the plot had had a hard time gaining any momentum to really go anywhere. It was interesting enough to keep my attention, and I liked Mickey as a character. I enjoyed watching his relationships with certain characters play out. I finished this book and it was very much like, okay, like that was a good time. I'm glad I read it, but there is actually a sequel and I do not feel any push to pick up the sequel. I very much don't think this story needed to be continued on.